Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Oatley here, and today we're working on Homework Help 9-5, and we are continuing with yesterday. Yesterday we were talking about integers, and today we are going to talk about integers a little bit, but we're going to transition to rational numbers, okay? So we're going to start with our review of integers. Integers are whole numbers and their opposites and zero. So an integer is any whole number. It can be its opposite, it can be positive or negative, and zero. That leaves all numbers that aren't whole numbers. Those are going to be rational numbers, okay? That would be numbers that can be expressed as a fraction, for example, a over b, where a and b are integers, where a and b are numbers, and b, right here, cannot equal 0. Okay, so fraction, kind of keep in mind that that is decimal as well. So integers are whole numbers, and rational numbers are fractions and decimals. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and show some examples. So on the first one, rational numbers are positive or negative fractions, which can include, go ahead and write some of these examples down, 3/5, negative 6/7. Here we have a mixed number, which is 1 and 2/3. Okay, still, even though it's a mixed number, it's a fraction, or you could have it rewritten as an improper fraction of 5/3, still a rational number. We've got negative 5 and 3/7, or that could be switched around to an improper again, 38/7. Okay, so these are some examples of rational positive or negative fractions. Okay, they can be written in mixed form or improper form or regular form. Okay, now the next one is going to be positive or negative decimals. So an example would be 0.5, or you could write that as 5/10 because they're the same thing. 5 right here is in the tenths place, so we just changed it around and switched it from a decimal to a fraction and made it 5/10. Okay? Or you could have negative 0.3, and yeah, you could switch that around and write that as a fraction. The 3 is in the tenths place, so it's 3/10, but we want to remember that we want to remember the negative sign. Or it could be a big long decimal, like 0.827. Okay, so there's some examples of decimals, positive or negative. And the last one is 0. Okay, you can have just 0, or you could have 0/10, whereas your top number is a 0. Or you could have something like 0/16, again, where your top number is a 0. Or you could have something bigger like 0/209. Okay? Again, those would all be examples. They're all fractions. Now remember, in our definition here, we said that A is the numerator and B is the denominator. The fraction in a rational number, the B, cannot be 0. Okay? So for example, if you had 3/0, well, that could not be a rational number. Okay? Or negative 3/0. Again, you have that in that bottom denominator place. So those would not be examples, okay? Or another word for that would be undefined, okay? We are going to go to the next section. I'm going to pull this up, and we are going to talk about fractions on a number line, okay? So to do this, I want you to go ahead and start here on the left, and I want you to count over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 spaces. And then go ahead and put a 0 there. Okay? Then, starting, just count over 4 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and you can label that 1. Then count over 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can label that 2. Then count over 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can label that 3. Then we can go back to 0, and again we're going to count 4 spaces, but we're going to go to the left to do those negative numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's why I have a -1. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, ending with a -2. So your number line should look just like mine, okay? Now, looking at this number line, we are going to answer some questions, okay? So here we go. How many equal lengths are between 0 and 1? Well, here's 0 and here's 1, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4 equal lengths. So go ahead and put down 4. Now the next question says, what fractional unit does the number line show? Well, because we have 4 spaces, 4 equal spaces between 0 and 1, our fractional unit is 1/4, okay? Because we've got 0, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 4/4. And 4/4 equals a whole, which is 1. Okay? And then we've got 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4, and then we would have 2. Okay? So it's in 1/4. Now I want you to draw and label point A at -1/4. So you're going to come up here to the number line and you're going to go negative. Well, -1/4 is going to be to the left and it's going to be right here. So let's label that A. Let's label point B at +3/4. Okay? Well, here we've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. Oops, I'm sorry, I didn't start at 0. We've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4 right there. 3/4 is going to be B, and 3/4 is less than 4/4, so it's on this side. Draw and label point C at -1.5. So is that going to be on the right or the left of 0? Yeah, it's going to be on the left, and I need to go over 1 at least. This will be 1 1/4, and this will be 1.5. So I'm going to label that as point C. And then point D is going to be let's see, point D says, this one's kind of tricky. It is an improper fraction. So it is 9/4, okay? You could just count over 9 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and label it point D. Or you could have changed that into an improper fraction. 4 goes into 9 twice with 1/4 left over. So that would be 2 1/4. So don't let that improper fraction there trick you if you see that on the homework. Okay? You can count over that many spaces, or you can just change it from a improper fraction to a mixed number. Go ahead and turn the page. And we are going to talk about opposites. We talked about the opposite of integers, but today we're going to talk about the opposite of rational numbers, okay? So the first ones we're going to do are we have 3/5 and 0.4/7, okay? Well, what is the opposite of 3/5? Well, the opposite rational number is negative 3/5. Okay, just like we did on our number line. Okay, going to the right 3/5 or going to the left 3/5. The opposite of 0.47 would be negative 47 hundredths. Okay, negative 2/7. What's the opposite of negative 2/7? Go ahead and write that down. And what's the opposite of negative 0.137? Go ahead and write that down. Good. You should have written 2/7 and 0.137 with no sign because we want to assume it's positive, right? Now on this bottom section, if you need to pause the video at all to write these questions down, please do. But we're going to go back to our opposite boxes. Okay, so here we have the opposite of 3/5. Now the question asks, what is this asking? It's asking, what is the opposite of 3/5? And well, what is the opposite of 3/5? Well, it's negative 3/5. Okay, so if you need to pause to write this in, go ahead, but I'm just going to continue to go on. I'm going to pull my paper up, and here we have our next box. So this one says the opposite of negative 3.7. So I just write that down in the question. What is it asking me? It's asking me what is the opposite of negative 3.7. Well, what is the opposite of negative 3.7? Right, it's just positive 3.7. Our next box says, what is the opposite of 0.8? Well, what is the opposite of 0.8? Well, that's easy. It's just negative 0.8. And on the last box, it says, what is the opposite of negative 4/5? So I want to write that down. We can't forget that these on the outside mean opposite, okay? What is the opposite of a negative 4/5? Well, instead of a negative, if we flip that to an opposite, it would be a positive, okay? That is how you do the opposite of a rational number, much like an integer. You just switch the sign, okay? Turning over to the last page, okay? This next page says draw and label a number line from -2 to +2, but it says by thirds. So instead of doing like we did on this last one over here, where we did it by fourths, this one we're gonna do by thirds, okay? So I want you to count over, I think 10 spaces is good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 spaces will work, and put a 0 in there. Okay, now if we're going by thirds, how many spaces should I count before I put 1? Well, we're going to count by thirds. So let's go ahead and go 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. And 3/3 is 1 whole. Okay, then we've got 1 1/3, 1 2/3, 1 3/3, and 1 3/3 would be 2. Okay, but we're only going -2 to +2. So then we can go back the other way. So again, we've got 1/3, 2/3, 1 whole, but this is going to be negative. And we've got 1 1/3, 1 2/3, 1 3/3. Okay, so I should have in between 3 equal spaces in between each number. So it says draw and label point E at -1 2/3. Okay, go ahead and do that. Draw and label point F at 1 1/3. Draw and label point G at 2/3. And draw and label point H at -1/3. Okay, I'll give you a minute. Go ahead and pause and get that done, but don't press pause again or don't press play until you have the answers on your number line. Okay, so you should have E right here at 1 2/3. You should have H right here at -1/3. You should have G right here at 2/3, and you should have F right here at 1 1/3. Okay, so hopefully you got those correct. Now here's the last one. You're going to be doing another number line, but instead of fourths like we did before, or instead of thirds like we did this time you're going to do let's see, let's go ahead and I think we're going to go by tenths. So I want you to count over 11 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and go ahead and put your 0 there. Okay, now we're going to go by tenths this time. Okay, so follow with me on 0, and we're going to go to the right and we're going to count 5 spaces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and let's go ahead and put we're not going to put a point or anything, but we're going to label it 0.5, and then 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So this would be 1. Okay, so I've got 0, half, and 1. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. So go ahead and do that, but this time we want to make it negative. Okay, so here are the questions. How many equal lengths are between 0 and 1? Well, I already told you that we're doing tenths, but that's how you would find out, is you would count how many spaces in between, and there were 10 spaces. So what fractional unit does this number line show? Well, here we've got 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, 4/10, 5/10, 6/10, 7/10, 8th, 10th, 9th, 10th, and 1/10. Okay, so it is a tenth, 1/10, or tenths. Okay, draw and label point J at -0.2, K at 0.7, and L at -0.4. Okay, so go ahead and take a minute to do that. Okay, J is -2, so 1, 2. Hopefully you had K at 7, which should be here. And hopefully you had L at -0.4. Okay, and then the very last question says draw and label point L's opposite and label it M. Well, point L's opposite was -0.4, so the opposite would be +0.4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to put a point on there, and I'm going to label it M. Okay, so that was basically it for today's assignment. We talked about we reviewed what an integer was. Okay, an integer is a whole number, its opposite, which could be positive or negative, and 0. And rational numbers are the fractions and the decimals. Okay, and then we also learned to put them on a number line, just like we've been doing before, but with whole numbers. We've done whole numbers, but this time we had to use fractions and put those in between. And however many spaces in between, that shows your fractional unit. So if there are 4 spaces, then it's a fourth. Okay. between 0 and 1, if there are 10 spaces, then it's a tenth. Okay, and then always remember on the left side of the number line are your negative numbers. Okay, I think we should be good with your assignment today. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to email your teacher and let us know, and we can walk you through those. Please remember, I know I say this every time, but please remember that we miss you guys so much. I'm sitting here in my basement recording this video all by myself, and I would much rather be visiting with you guys and doing it together. So you're not having fun and teachers aren't having fun either. So thank you, and can't wait to see you guys soon. Bye-bye.